Hi everyone. So today we'll be doing a webinar on the future of work, exploring the implications of Ireland's work-life balance and the Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2023. I'm your presenter. My name is Eilish. So I'm with the consultancy team here at Peninsula. I've been with Peninsula since about August 2022. I'm coming up on the year mark shortly. In consultancy, we deal with and draft all of your HR documentation. And if you need a contract, you can contact us and we'll draft that for you for your specific needs. We also draft bespoke policies to fit the needs of the organization. And we also make sure that all HR documentation is up to date with current legislation. So on today's agenda, what this new legislation means for Irish employers, the 5 major changes coming in under this new legislation, when the new law is expected to come into force, and the changes you need to make to your employment policies. So the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. The stated aim of the EU directive on the work-life balance for parents and carers is to increase the participation of women in the labour market and the take-up of family-related leave and flexible working arrangements. This is expected to come into effect in summer 2023. So it'll be introducing a statutory right of reasonable access to flexible working for all, but not limited to parents or carers. It'll be aligning the eligibility criteria for remote working arrangements provided for in the general scheme of the Right to Request Remote Working Bill, with those contained in this bill for flexible working arrangements. It is also aimed at encouraging a more equal sharing of family-related leave between men and women. For that purpose, the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2022 will amend the Parental Leave Act 1998 to entitle certain employees to take leave for medical care purposes and to request flexible working arrangements for caring purposes. The future legislation will also incorporate the previous Right to Request Remote Working Bill 2022. There is no substantive change to the definition of an employee contained in the Parental Leave Act 1998, 2019. As such, the rights contained in the bill will apply to all persons who have entered into or work under a contract of employment and will include part-time and fixed-term employees and persons holding office under or in the service of the state. Like I said, this bill is expected to come into effect summer of 2023, but this also can change. So what are the new employee rights? So 5 days unpaid leave for medical care purposes for parents of children under 12 and carers. 5 days paid leave for victims of domestic violence. Right to request flexible working for parents and carers. Right to request remote working for all employees. And right to request breastfeeding breaks extended to 2 years. So the future legislation will also incorporate the previous Right to Request Remote Working Bill 2020-22. The bill will give effect to the EU Work-Life Balance Directive, introducing a range of measures to improve family-friendly work practices and support women in the workforce. The proposed legislation will give parents and carers of children under the 12 right to request flexible work. It will introduce 5 days unpaid leave for medical care reasons and extend paid entitlement to breastfeeding breaks from 6 months to 2 years. The bill will also see the introduction of paid leave for victims of domestic violence. We might leave this up for a couple of seconds just so everyone can take notes if they wish. And with the help from my colleague, we'll pop in a poll into the chat if you could all please answer it. see these. Let's see the results. One moment there. Okay, can't seem to see the results. So we'll just move on and we'll come back to that. Okay, so the WRC Code of Practice on the right to request remote work. So the WRC is developing a code of practice to provide further guidance for employers. Employers will be obliged to consider these requests under the new law. It should be remembered that there is no obligation to grant all requests. If employers refuse the request, the Act states they must provide a written notification to the employee confirming the reasons for the refusal. So, as all employees with more than 6 months continuous service will soon have a right to request remote work, all employers will need to plan for how they intend to manage these requests. The Workplace Relations Commission is also developing a code of practice which should provide further guidance for both employers and employees on how to manage requests for remote working arrangements. While employers will be obliged to consider these requests under the new law, it should be remembered that there is no obligation to grant all requests. If employers refuse requests, the Act states they must provide a written notification to the employee confirming the reasons for the refusal. Okay. And how will this affect employers? So, potential impact of the new law. Employers will need to develop policies for managing requests and prepare for negotiations with employees who want to alter their working patterns. So not all jobs lend themselves to remote working. Employers in industries that have developed remote practices in recent years may find themselves under pressure to grant requests. So the new right to request flexible work for parents and carers and the right to request remote work for all employees are designed to promote better work-life balance. While they certainly represent a new development in employment in Ireland, how these new rights operate in practice remains to be seen. Employers will need to develop policies for managing this type of request and prepare for negotiations with employees who want to alter their working patterns. The code of practice to be issued by the Workplace Relations Commission should be helpful in this regard. It is important to remember that not all jobs lend themselves to remote work, so while every employee will soon enjoy these new rights, it simply won't be a factor in certain industries. Employers in industries that have developed a remote work practice in recent years may have found themselves under pressure to grant requests if operations were largely unaffected by remote working arrangements brought into the deal with pandemic restrictions. It might be difficult to refuse a request for productivity or operational reasons. And with the jobs market remaining tight, employers who refuse requests risk losing valued employees to competitors who does offer flexible or remote working options. So each business will need to tailor new policies to the specific needs of operations. It's a good idea to begin preparing to update handbooks and policies to reflect these upcoming changes, which will make remote working more accessible for the employees. So tailoring policies to specific operational needs. So the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2022 acknowledges that each business has unique and operational requirements. Therefore, it is essential for employers to tailor their employment policies to accommodate the specific needs of their organization. This may include considering factors such as industry, job roles, and business objectives when implementing the provisions of the Act. Updating handbooks and policies. So with the introduction of the new rights and provisions under the Act, it is crucial for employers to update their handbooks and employment policies. This ensures that employees are aware of their rights and entitlements, and it helps maintain transparency and compliance within the organisation. Employers should review and revise existing policies to reflect the changes brought about by the Act, particularly in relation to remote working. So making remote working more accessible, the Act aims to enhance accessibility to remote working for a broader range of employees. Employers should embrace this opportunity to create policies and procedures that facilitate remote working arrangements. This may involve establishing guidelines for remote work, addressing issues such as communication, productivity measurement, and data security. By updating policies to reflect the Act's provisions, employers can support a flexible and accommodating work environment. Communication and employee engagement. As employers update their policies, it is essential to effectively communicate the changes to employees. Clear communication ensures that employees understand their rights, obligations, and how the new policies impact their work arrangements. Employers should engage in open dialogue with employees, addressing any questions or concerns they may have regarding the updated policies. So compliance with legal requirements. When updating policies, employers should ensure that they are in full compliance with the requirements outlined in the Work-Life Balance and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2022. It is advisable to seek legal advice or consult relevant resources such as ourselves to ensure that policies align with the law and accompanying regulations guidelines. And here is where we're going to insert the second poll for this evening, this morning, and my colleague is going to insert that there.
Thanks, Eilish. Just while the poll is going on there, I thought I'd just quickly read out the results. As you couldn't see them from the previous one, so I thought I'd help out.
Thank you.
So for the remote working request, we had 56% of the attendees had said yes, that they had received a request. 42% had said no, and 2% already had remote working staff.
Brilliant. Okay, that's interesting to see.
Perfect. What I do, I'm going to close the poll now for this one, and I can read you out the results.
Perfect.
So for this one here, when did you last update your staff handbook? 49% has recently updated it within the last 6 months.
Brilliant.
22% within a year, and then 24% above a year. So there's also 4% that don't have a staff handbook.
Okay, that's fair. So it's good to see that some of you have updated the handbook in the last 6 months. That's what we like to see. Here in the consultancy team, we tend to try and update the handbook once a year, just to make sure it's all in line with current legislation. But that the poll is good to see that different companies are in different places. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer some of your questions, and I can see some of them here. Okay, so let me see. I can see the first question. So must an employee have a certain period of work to obtain remote working? So an employee must have 6 months continuous service before a period of flexible working arrangements can commence. An 8-week notice of a request must be given to the employer. So a request for flexible working arrangement must be in writing and signed by the employee. An employer must respond to such request within 4 weeks of receipt, and this time period may be extended by a further 4 weeks if the employer is having difficulty assessing the viability of the request. Okay, so let's see what the second question is. Okay, so what are the grounds for a postponement of flexible working arrangement? Okay, so an employer may, by notice in writing, postpone the commencement of a flexible working arrangement by up to 6 months, where satisfied that its commencement would have a substantial adverse effect on the operation of its business. profession or occupation, by reason of seasonal variations in the volume of work concerned, the unavailability of a person to carry out the duties of the employee, the nature of those duties, the number of employees in the employment, or the number of other approved flexible working arrangements which fall within the same period, or other relevant matters. So interestingly, there is no indicative list or reasons that might justify refusal or request contained in the bill. The notice must contain a summary of the grounds for the postponement before informing the employee of a postponement. The employee must consult with the employee on this. The employer must consult with the employee on this. Okay, so let's see the third question. Okay. Okay. Is there any other amendments to the Maternity Protection Act? So the bill contains other amendments to the Maternity Protection Act to provide a transgender male who has, in accordance with the Gender Recognition Act 2015, obtained a gender recognition cert, subsequently becomes pregnant, to fall within the scope of the maternity protection legislation. Okay, so the fourth question. How has the Act extended the right to breastfeeding breaks? Okay, so let's see. The Act extends the right to breastfeeding breaks from 1 year to 2 years. This means that employees who are breastfeeding can take breaks during their working hours to express milk or breastfeed their child up until the child reaches 2 years of age. The provisions recognise the importance of supporting breastfeeding mothers and ensuring that they have the necessary time and facilities to maintain their breastfeeding relationship while working. Okay, let's see what time. Perfect. Okay, let's see if we have another question. What is the provision for victims of domestic violence under the Act? Okay, so the Act grants victims of domestic violence 5 days of paid leave. This provision acknowledges the importance of providing support and time off for the individuals who are dealing with repercussions of domestic violence. It allows victims to take the necessary steps to ensure their safety and well-being without worrying about the financial implications. Okay. We'll take a few more questions. So what is the WRC Code of Practice on the right to request remote work? The WRC, so that would be the Workplace Relations Commission, is developing a code of practice to provide additional guidance for employers regarding the right to request remote work. This code will offer further clarity and recommendations on how employers should handle remote work requests from employees. Okay, and let's see, one more. Will employers be obligated to consider remote work requests under the new law? Okay, so yes, under the new law, employers will be obliged to consider remote work requests from employees. This means that when an employee makes a formal request to work remotely, the employer is required to review and assess the request in a fair and reasonable manner. Okay, so we'll take one more, and this is our last question for today. If an employer refuses to a remote work request, what is required of them under the Act? Okay, so if an employer decides to refuse a remote work request, the Act stipulates that they must provide a written notification to the employee. This notification should clearly outline the reasons for refusal. By providing a written explanation, employers ensure transparency and enable employees to understand the decision-making process. Please note, so basically this would be that it would have to be written down. It would have to give the reasons why, just so that the employee understands why they're being refused. So I think that's the last question for today. Thank you so much for your time in coming to this webinar, this e-learning session on the Miscellaneous Provisions Act. And thank you so much. Bye.